Hey, happy Friday. Welcome back to another Friday Tech Workshop. I'm Joseph, a senior developer advocate with Appsmith, and this week we're going to build an AI chatbot interface using a custom widget so that you can interact with any AI's API and give your end users a chatbot with a message history. We're also going to add a copy button on the responses and markdown and syntax highlighting. So it's going to be very similar to the experience when you're using ChatGPT, and it applies that rich text formatting, and the code samples actually have syntax highlighting, so it's easier to read. So we're going to build out everything using just vanilla JavaScript and HTML at first to get the basic functionality working, and then we'll use a few libraries for the markdown and syntax highlighting. So let's get started by first checking out the finished app. I'll give you a preview of what we're about to build, and then we'll start over and build the entire thing from scratch. All right, let's check it out. Okay, so here's a quick demo of what we're going to build today. I just have an input widget and a button for sending a prompt, and then the custom widget is displaying the chat history. So I'm going to ask it to tell me about Appsmith, and you'll see that it's applying different formatting for the user prompt separate from the AI response. I also added a copy button on the responses, and then I set it up to be conversational, so it remembers the context and the previous prompt. So I can ask it what data sources are supported. And I don't have to say Appsmith again because it's getting the entire thread each time. It has all of that to reference. So, and the other thing I added is syntax highlighting for code samples and markdown support. So I'm going to ask it to write 3 different code samples in different languages and add some markdown headers. And you'll see that we get different sizes of text with markdown, and then the syntax highlighting on the code samples. So all of this is done using vanilla JavaScript and HTML for the displaying the history and the copy button. And then I'm using a couple libraries for Markdown and for the highlighting. So we're going to build this out from scratch, and I'm going to set it up so that it's easy to tie into any AI. Right now I'm using Appsmith's built-in AI, but if you want to swap that out and use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever, I'm setting this up so that it's just displaying an array of messages, and that can come from anywhere. So we're going to start out by adding a new page, and I'll get the UI set up here, drag in a custom widget, and we'll also need the input and a send button. All right, and I'm going to make this multi-line. And then I'm going to just temporarily add a table here for displaying the messages until we get the custom widget fully working, because we're going to have an array of message data that we want to display and feed that into the custom widget. But before it's built and actually working, just to give us somewhere to view that. So now I'm going to head over to the tutorial now. I wrote a post on the portal, so you can check out the link in the description, and it will make building this a lot easier. You can copy some of the code from there. And so I'm going to do the same thing just to speed this up a little bit today. So to start out with, we're going to use this array of messages, and this is just to display something in the custom widget before we start messing with AI. At the end, we will tie in an AI to show how you can use this custom widget, copy it into your app, and connect it to any AI. But for right now, I want to just focus on building the custom widget itself. And so copying this code here, we will put this into a new JS object. And so this defines this chat history array as one message from the chatbot or one from the user, and then a response from the chatbot here. And then when you click the send message button, that's going to take whatever is in that input one and push that to this array here. It's going to update the array and give it a new value that we can display in the custom widget. So let's go back to the UI here. I'm going to connect that JS object and display that table right here. Oh, I think I need to refresh before it can see that. There it is, chat history. Okay, so just so that we can see a new message get added, I just wanted to add the table. I guess I got to connect the button here still to our send message function. There it is. So now I can add a new message to that array, and I'm saying it's for the user. And then, as I continue to add new ones here, it's adding a new value to that variable, but it's just in this session. As soon as I refresh, it's going to default back to that initial 2 messages. So next, I'm going to pass this data into the custom widget. So if we select that here on the default model and clear that out, and then I want to send in an object with a chat history that's coming from JS Object 1 chat history from that array. Okay. So this custom widget will be able to access the array, and we'll update that array and then try to display those results here in the custom widget. Okay, so now we'll head into the custom widget editor. And first thing is just to clear out the default sample code here. And then I'm going to head back to the tutorial here just to make this go a little quicker instead of typing everything. I've already got this tutorial written up, and if you want to check out the link in the description, you can come here and copy a lot of these code snippets and build this out, or just copy the template. So I'm going to share a template of this as well. But the first thing is to just define a container to display the messages. And I've got it nested here so that I can have like a outer container or background. So I'm just putting 2 containers into the HTML side here. All right, and then we'll go back to the tutorial here. And I've got a couple functions here. Let's get this into the editor, and then we'll go through what it does. Okay, so I am grabbing that container by its ID. And then I've got a function that will render a message. So it takes in a message and then a Boolean if it's actually from the user or from the AI. So I can format it differently. And then at this point, I'm just converting that string in the chat because it's saying the role is user or chatbot. And this turns that into the Boolean here, and then appending that to the DOM here. So it's adding a new element for each one of those messages. So then the update messages function, this runs when the model changes, when we add a new value to that array. And it's detecting that change as soon as the app loads because it's defining that variable. So the update message here, this gets ran whenever the model changes, on model change, and that's inside the onReady. So the very first time that the app loads and the array is populated, it's just going through the chat history and adding a new message for each one of those. It's for each rendering a message, and then if the role is user, it'll add a little, it's adding that class name for it. So there's no formatting yet, but I'm at least giving it a class name so we can target it and know that it's different from the user. Okay, so next let's add some styling, and I've got some basic CSS here that we can add. So I'll put this into the style tab here. So now we're getting some separation here, and you can tell the difference between a user message and AI. So the next thing is I want to add a copy button. Now, I'm only going to put the copy button on the responses that are from the AI because, you don't really need to copy your prompt that you sent in. So head back to the tutorial here. And like I said, this one was a little tricky to figure out. So I'm just kind of going through. I'm going to grab the code from the tutorial and then we'll talk through how it works instead of trying to type it all live because we would be here for probably 2 hours. So I'm going to add this link here to the HTML side. And this is so we can pull in an icon from the Font Awesome library. We're only using one icon, so you probably wouldn't want to import a library just for that. But this is more here just to show an example of how to use the icon. So that'll import the library. And now I've got to update the code to actually add that copy button conditionally. So only if it's from the user. So I've got an updated version of that render message function here, and then a function to handle the copy. So when the text, when the user clicks, you want to grab the text from that particular element. And then this function here is actually creating the icon and returning it. So let's go ahead and put all of this into the editor. We're going to overwrite this earlier version of the render message. And now you can see we've got a copy icon here. And it's only adding that on the system or the AI responses. Okay, now this has added the copy button, but it's not actually going to set the clipboard because custom widgets, they're sandboxed for security and they're not able to access your clipboard directly. So all I'm doing here is grabbing the value and I'm saving it to the Appsmith model so that I can access it outside the custom widget and then triggering an event named copy. But we have to add that event for the custom widget itself because it's just going to try to trigger an event, but there needs to be one that matches that name. So if we go back to the custom widget editor now, or the main app editor rather, and you'll see this on reset click. This is part of the default code that comes with a custom widget. I'm going to delete this event and add my own event named copy. And then we want to add an action to that event. So when this event gets fired, we will copy to clipboard. And the value that we're going to copy is coming from custom one model. And then I believe I called it copy text. So double check that. Yeah, when it saves it to the model, it'll be called copy text. Okay, so now I should be able to click this copy button and actually get the text from this particular response. And all right, so we've got that much working. We can display the different types of messages, and I've got a copy button and different formatting on each one. So next I want it to be able to display some Markdown. And so if I put in a header and some bold text or whatever, we can add that message. And it does get added here to the array and it gets displayed, but it's not displaying it as Markdown yet. And if I tried doing like a code sample, you know, it's not going to have that syntax highlighting. So it's functional as far as being able to display the array, but I want to add that extra formatting and everything. So it's a little easier to read the code samples. So let's head back to the tutorial. I've got all the links there and just make this a little quicker. So the first thing, I'm going to import this marked library, and I'll show you here in JS Deliver as well. So if you check it out on here, there's a couple ways to import it. I'm using the ESM version, which you can do with script tags on the HTML side, or you can just put this one line on the JavaScript side. So back here to the custom widget, to the JS. And so I'm going to start out with importing marked here. And then let's see. So what I did here is just update the render message function. Instead of setting the inner HTML to the message, I'm setting it to marked message, and it parses it and does the rest of it for you. So, okay, so we will overwrite this function then with the one that's using marked to parse it, and you'll see that now we've got larger text here on the header, so it's displaying Markdown. And the next thing is getting the syntax highlighting so that it can actually work with some code samples. So let's go back to the tutorial here. So this time around, I decided to use the separate links here in case you want to change out the CSS version. So there's the library itself that you need to import for highlighting, and then it wants to apply some type of color scheme or theme. And there's other ones you can use. So I did this one as separate links, and I'm just going to paste both of these here on the HTML side. And then if you want to change out the theme, you can use a different style from highlight. So next is I updated the render message function. If you check out the very end of it here, it's it's looking for all of the pre-code blocks. So what happens is the first response from the AI, it's not displayed in Markdown yet, but it has Markdown code in it. And so when you run marked on that message, it's finding all the backticks, the 3 lines, 3 backticks for a code block, and it puts them in a pre-code element. So at first, I'm only creating a div, but then if you look at the HTML afterwards, you'll see these pre and code divs. And so what that's doing is creating those from marked. And now that they're there, I'm using those blocks, only going over the code ones to highlight, because we want to apply Markdown everywhere and it might not be code, but then we only want to use syntax highlighting on the code. So copying this, we will replace that render message function one more time. Let's see, there's the other side of it. All right, so let's test out the highlighting. I'm going to grab this function and we will send that as a message. But for this to work, you have to use the code block. So 3 backticks and then the language. And I think the highlight language, it'll detect it if you don't have the second part there saying what language, but you at least want the backticks around everything so that it'll turn it into a code block, and then those are the only elements that the highlight function is looking at. So we will submit this. Let's see. There it is. Cool. We got syntax highlighting now too. It's using a monospace font. It knows what things are variables or functions or whatever, and it's going to be specific to the language. So if you put in different code samples, different languages, the syntax highlighting should be right for each language. And then you can add a different theme if you want by swapping out that CSS link. So that's it. We got pretty much everything built. I can get rid of the table now that we have our messages being displayed. The last thing would be to actually connect this to a specific AI. Now, I'm going to use Appsmith AI, which is free and it's built in, and you don't need an API key. So really easy to use, but we'll set this up in a way that you could easily change it out and use whatever AI API that you want to. So I'm going to head back to the tutorial here. I did this the same way in the tutorial, was getting everything working as the custom widget first and making it kind of generic and then connecting it to an AI. So first thing we're going to do is add a new API using Appsmith AI. And I'm just going to copy this prompt that I'm using. So if we head back to here, I'm going to add a new query. And so for the data source, I've already got one set up for Appsmith AI. But if you haven't created one yet, you can just add a new data source first and choose Appsmith AI. You can also add a file or multiple files to it if you want to give it some context. So I'm going to add a query called send message using the generate text method, and then just put in this prompt, which gives it the current input and then the chat history. And I'm telling the AI to just review the history and then reply. So the Appsmith AI generate text, it just generates one response. It on its own, it doesn't remember that history, but I'm passing in the history so that it can respond with everything. So now that I have this query, I want to go update the function here. So in JS object 1, when we go to send a message, we want to actually call the AI and get a new response and then push that to the chat history array as well. So one more time back to the tutorial here, and I've got a updated version of the chat history where it's just this intro prompt. And so we don't need to have a fake response anymore to display. We're actually going to have one from the AI. So we will copy this. And then when that send message, when this function gets ran, it's going to call mine. I need to rename it here to add message. There we go. So it will run the add message query, wait for that response, and then add that as a new object to the array, calling this one a role of chatbot. So if the role is user, we'll have one class on it. And if it's chatbot, we have another class to be able to target them differently and display that formatting. And then I'm just clearing the input after the message is added so that you can type your next one. So I think this is just about ready. Let's refresh here to clear that input and try it out. Now this is still running the same function as before, but now it's updated to use the AI. So let's see if it can tell me about Appsmith now. Added our message, waiting for a response here. There we go. Cool. And then let's try the code sample again. All right. Awesome. There we go. We got the syntax highlighting. Markdown's working too. If we want to, does it do it on mine or just, yeah, it does add the markdown on the user message as well. But the syntax highlighting is only on the response. You can change that if you want, but that's just how I set it up. So I think that's it for this week. This was a tough one to figure out. So I've got the written version of the tutorial, and I'm going to post it as a template, and you've got the video. So if you got any questions on this one or ideas for other workshops, feel free to drop a comment below. Thanks again for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next week.